To the world, Doris Day was Hollywood's sunshine, but her grandson, Ryan Melcher, has finally exposed the heartbreaking lie we were all sold. While America saw a billionaire movie star, Doris was living a nightmare. Her husband didn't just manage her career, he stole her entire fortune, leaving her with nothing but debt. She wasn't a fairy tale princess, she was the victim of a 20-year robbery. This is the story of how the girl next door had to burn her own house down to finally be free. The boy locked outside the gate. To understand the magnitude of the secret Doris Day hid, we must start at the very end of her life, with the person who should have been closest to her. Ryan Melcher is Doris Day's grandson. He is the son of Terry Melcher, Doris's only child. When Doris passed away in 2019 at the age of 97, the world expected a scene of family unity. They expected her grandson to be by her bedside, holding the hand of the woman who raised him. But Ryan wasn't there. He wasn't allowed to be there. In a heartbreaking public statement, Ryan broke his silence. He revealed that he had been prevented from seeing his grandmother for the last 14 years of her life. He wasn't estranged because of a fight. He wasn't estranged because of a lack of love. He was estranged because of managers. He described a system of control around Doris that was so tight, even her own blood could not penetrate it. Ryan spoke of trying to reach out, sending emails, making calls, only to be blocked by a wall of new handlers who had taken over her estate. He painted a picture of a woman who, even in her 90s, was still being treated like an asset to be guarded, rather than a human being to be loved. Ryan's confession forces us to look at Doris Day differently. We see the smiling woman on the album covers, but Ryan saw a woman who was isolated. He saw a woman who had been conditioned by decades of Hollywood abuse to trust no one. Why would a grandmother let herself be cut off from her only grandson? Because for 50 years, Doris Day learned a brutal lesson. People are dangerous. People want something from you. They want your money, your fame, your light. People lie. Ryan's exclusion wasn't an accident. It was the final echo of a trauma that started decades earlier. It was the result of a life lived in the crosshairs of greedy men who saw her not as a person, but as a paycheck. To understand why she ended her life in a fortress, we have to look at how the fortress was built. We have to look at the lie of Doris Day. She wasn't born a star. She was manufactured, and the machinery that made her also broke her. The invention of the professional virgin. The world remembers Doris Day as the professional virgin. That was the label Hollywood gave her. It was a cruel, dismissive nickname for a woman who was the biggest box office draw on the planet. In the 1950s and 60s, she represented an American ideal that never actually existed. She was the good girl, the girl who waited until marriage, the girl who made pot roast and never raised her voice. In movies like Pillow Talk and That Touch of Mink, she played the eternal optimist. But this image, this side A of her life, was a cage. The reality, the side B, was that Doris Day was a woman who had seen the darkest corners of life before she turned 20. She didn't want to be a singer, she wanted to be a dancer. But in 1937, a car accident shattered her right leg. She spent a year in bed, her bones knit together with metal pins. Her dream of dancing was destroyed before it began. But it was in that bed, listening to the radio for hours on end, that she found her voice. She sang along to Ella Fitzgerald, mimicking the breath, the tone, the emotion. She learned early that life isn't fair, but she also learned how to adapt. She turned to singing because it was the only thing she could do while sitting down. She sang from pain, that tremor in her voice, that vulnerability. It wasn't an act. It was the sound of a girl who had lost her first dream and was desperately trying to find a second one. And her romantic life was far from the chaste fantasy she portrayed on screen. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was a trombone player and a deeply violent man. He abused her. He hurt her while she was pregnant with her son Terry. He threatened to end her life in jealous rages. She escaped him with nothing but her baby and her will to survive. Her second husband, George Weidler, abandoned her because he couldn't handle her rising fame. He felt emasculated by her success. By the time she became America's sweetheart, she was a twice-divorced single mother who had looked violence in the face. But Hollywood didn't want a survivor. They wanted a doll, so the studio system polished her rough edges. They dyed her hair blonde, they put her in pastel dresses, They told her to smile, and she did. She smiled so hard it hurt. She became the perfect product, a commodity that could be sold to housewives and husbands alike. But a product needs a manager. A product needs someone to sell it. And in 1951, she married the man who would become the architect of her destruction, Martin Melcher, the man who stole her soul. If Al Jordan was a physical abuser, Martin Melcher was a psychological one. Marty wasn't just her husband, he was her manager, he was her agent, he was her producer. He took control of every aspect of her life. He told her what movies to make. He told her what songs to sing. He told her how to dress. He was always there, hovering on the edge of the set, watching her, critiquing her, owning her. Doris, exhausted from years of struggle as a single mother, handed him the reins. She thought she was finding a partner. She thought she was finding a father figure for her son, Terry. She trusted him completely. She famously said, "I just sing the songs and learn the lines. Marty takes care of the rest." For 17 years, Marty took care of everything. He worked her like a mule. Doris made film after film, album after album. She was exhausted. She begged for a break. She wanted to spend time with her son. Marty would say, "Just one more, Doris. We need the money. We need to secure our future. Don't be lazy." She believed him. She thought they were building a nest egg. She thought they were billionaires. She was the top-earning star in Hollywood. The money was pouring in like a river, but she never saw the bank statements. She never signed the checks. Marty handled it. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was a slow drip of poison over nearly 2 decades. Marty isolated her. He made her feel stupid about business. He made her feel like she couldn't survive without his guidance. He was the gatekeeper. He partnered with a lawyer named Jerome Rosenthal. Together, they set up a scheme that is now legendary in the annals of Hollywood greed. They weren't investing her money. They were embezzling it. They put her millions into fake oil wells, into bankrupt hotels, into cattle ranches that didn't exist. They charged her exorbitant fees for managing the money they were stealing. They used her earnings to fund their own failed projects, playing big shots with her hard-earned cash. And Doris, the woman whose face was on every magazine cover, had no idea. She was too busy working to notice she was being robbed. In 1968, Marty Melcher died suddenly of a heart enlarged by stress. Doris was devastated. Despite his control, he was her husband. She mourned him. She thought she was a grieving widow who would now retire and live off the fortune they had built. But a few weeks after the funeral, a man handed her a piece of paper. It wasn't a bank statement showing millions, it was a tax bill. And then, the truth came crashing down. The rude awakening. The scene in the lawyer's office in 1968 should be in a movie, but it was too cruel for fiction. Doris sat there, 46 years old, wearing black. She asked, "How much do we have?" The answer was, nothing. Actually, it was worse than nothing. She was $500,000 in debt. That is equivalent to nearly $5 million today. The fortune was gone. The $20 million she had earned, nearly $200 million today, had vanished. Marty and Rosenthal had squandered every single penny. She wasn't rich. She was destitute. She owed the IRS. She owed the banks. She didn't even own the clothes on her back. But the final knife in the back was yet to come. While going through Marty's papers, she found a contract. It was dated recently. It was signed by Marty Melcher. It committed Doris Day to star in a weekly television sitcom for CBS. 5 seasons. No script approval. No creative control. Marty had trapped her in a contract from the grave. He had signed her life away without even asking her, just to get a cash advance to cover his debts. Imagine the horror. You are grieving your husband. You have just found out he stole all your money, and now you find out you have to go to work on a show you hate just to pay off the debts he left you. Doris collapsed. This was the moment the American sweetheart died, and the real woman was born. She could have given up. She could have let the darkness take her. But Doris Day came from a generation that honored its debts. She had a son to support. She looked at the contract. She looked at her empty bank account, and she stood up. She said, "Fine, I'll do it." She hated the Doris Day show. She hated television. She thought it was a step down from cinema, but she showed up. Every day for 5 years. She memorized the lines. She hit her marks. She flashed that famous smile for the cameras. The irony was brutal. On screen, she played a happy, independent woman. Off-screen, she was a prisoner of her dead husband's greed. Inside, she was screaming. Outside, she was professional. She worked her way out of debt. One episode at a time, she saved herself. And while she was working, she was also fighting. She sued Jerome Rosenthal, the lawyer who helped Marty steal her life. The legal battle lasted for years. It was ugly, it was exhausting, but she refused to settle. In 1974, she won. The court awarded her $22.8 million, the largest judgment in California history at the time. The judge called Rosenthal's actions a tragic chapter in the history of the legal profession. Doris Day had vindicated herself. She got some of the money back, but she settled for less just to end it. The money wasn't the point anymore. The point was the truth. She had proven that the dumb blonde was smarter than all the men who tried to use her. The Great Escape to Carmel. In 1973, the Doris Day Show ended. Her debt was paid. Her lawsuit was won. Hollywood was ready for her comeback. They wanted her to start making movies again. But Doris Day did something that no one expected. She packed her bags, she got in her car, and she drove north. She didn't stop until she reached Carmel by the sea, a quiet, foggy town on the California coast. And she never went back. She quit. She didn't retire. She escaped. She realized that Hollywood was a toxic wasteland. It was a place of illusions, and she was done with illusions. She bought a house that was surrounded by high walls. She filled it with dogs, lots of dogs. She famously said, "I have never met an animal I didn't like, and I can't say the same thing about people." This wasn't a joke. It was her new philosophy. Animals didn't lie to her. Animals didn't embezzle her money. Animals didn't sign contracts in her name. Animals just loved her. She founded the Doris Day Animal Foundation. She poured her remaining wealth and her energy into saving stray dogs and cats. She became the dog lady of Carmel. She spent her days walking on the beach with her dogs, feeling the cold ocean mist far away from the hot lights of the studio. She found a peace in the routine of caring for animals that she never found on a movie set. When producers called, she hung up. When award shows wanted to honor her, she declined. They offered her a Golden Globe for lifetime achievement. She said, "Mail it to me." She refused to step foot in Los Angeles again. To the industry, this looked like madness. Why would a star walk away from the light? But to Doris, it was sanity. She was reclaiming the autonomy that Marty had stolen from her. For the first time in her life, she ate what she wanted. She wore what she wanted, baggy sweaters, comfortable shoes, no makeup. She woke up when she wanted. She found peace in the fog. She realized that the A side of her life, the fame, the glamour, was the prison. The B side, the quiet, the dogs, the anonymity, was freedom. She lived in Carmel for 40 years. She became a recluse, but she wasn't sad. She was safe. She had built a world where no one could hurt her again. But there was a cost to this safety. And this brings us back to her grandson, Ryan. The cost of the fortress. When you build a fortress to keep the bad guys out, you sometimes keep the good guys out too. As Doris aged, her circle of trust shrank. She became terrified of being used again. The trauma of Marty's betrayal never fully healed. New managers and caretakers entered her life. They catered to her love for animals. They managed her foundation. But according to Ryan Melcher, they also managed her access to the outside world. Ryan claims that these new handlers slowly cut him off. They told him she was too tired to see him. They told him she didn't want visitors. Ryan, who had grown up visiting her in Carmel, who had played with her dogs, suddenly found himself on the outside of the gate. He tried to reach out. He sent emails. He called, but the gatekeepers stood firm. He didn't force his way in because he respected her. He thought it was what she wanted. He didn't know if it was her choice or if her fear of betrayal had been weaponized against her own family by people who wanted to control her legacy. This is the final, lingering tragedy of Doris Day. The trauma inflicted by Martin Melcher didn't end in 1968. It echoed for 50 years. It created a woman who was so afraid of being exploited that she isolated herself from her own blood. She died in 2019, surrounded by her dogs and her caretakers. But her grandson had to read about it on the news. It is a heavy price to pay for safety. But can we blame her? After what she endured, After being treated like a cash machine by the men who swore to love her, who can blame her for trusting a golden retriever more than a grandson? She chose the love that felt safe. She chose the love that didn't ask for a percentage. The legacy of the survivor. Doris Day's life was not a romantic comedy. It was a survival epic. She survived a car crash that broke her legs. She survived abusive husbands. She survived a manager who stole a fortune. She survived the brutal machinery of Hollywood. We look at her movies and we see sunshine, but we should look at her life and see steel. She was not the naive girl she played. She was a warrior who clawed her way out of a hole that would have buried anyone else. Her grandson, Ryan, spoke out not to attack her, but to defend her truth. He wanted the world to know that she wasn't just a smiling face. She was a complex, wounded, brilliant woman who fought for her freedom until the very end. She was a rebel, Ryan said. She walked away from the biggest career in the world to save herself. So the next time you see Doris Day singing Que Sera, Sarah, listen closely. Whatever will be, will be. It isn't a happy song. It is a song of resignation. It is a song of acceptance. It is the anthem of a woman who learned that she couldn't control the men around her, but she could control where she died. She died free. She died debt-free. And she died with her dogs. For Doris Day, that was the only happy ending that mattered. What do you think? Was Doris Day right to cut off the world? And do you think Hollywood owes her an apology for how it treated her? Let us know in the comments below.
This is the seventh lens.
We see the pain behind the smile. Thank you for watching.